put into the chat where you are, and also just a word or two about what's alive for you right now. It's always interesting for us to make a connection a little, it's not very direct, but somewhat around who's present and also what's up. So I'm going to open my chat to look, and also Dinan will join us. Let's see. And Dinan, if you could just share some of the places. I see somebody's
Sure.
from England, Canada.
Yeah, Oakland, California, Arizona, England, Minneapolis, Canada, Germany, everywhere. There's France, Alaska, Akimi from Brazil, Vanilla from Oxford, UK. Lots of UK, Priscilla from London, England, and also Cambridge, someone from Cambridge. Then,
And Wendy, I'm seeing, I asked for people to put into the chat just a few things about
yeah,
what's alive for them right now. I think
yeah,
a lot is alive for us. If you could just read a few of those, that would be
sure.
great.
Patricia says possibility.
Okay.
Elizabeth says confusion. Barbara says worried. Tracy says healing. And Linda in the UK says grateful to be here. Let's see. Elizabeth says fired up to protest. Marissa says appreciating this opportunity. Someone says energized by challenge.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I think a lot of us are experiencing, some of us, many things at the same time. I think what would be helpful right now is that we collectively take a breath and remember really why we're here. So thank you. I want to begin with offering gratitude to Upaya's residents and to the staff who make this series possible. It's many hands, much work under the hood, if you will. And I really have to offer thanks to my teachers, dear Thich Nhat Hanh and Glassman Roshi, and also my beloved friend Joanna Macy, who over so many years of learning and friendship with them, I hope that my practice has been strengthened and my work as a social and environmental activist has been strengthened. So thank you, dear ones. Joanna just had her 96th birthday, and she is still going strong. Reflecting on Joanna, as I thought about my teaching today, she wrote, grace happens when we act with others on behalf of our world. And so, many of you have been part of this series over the 5 months, and it's about fostering connection between us and also care, and also really building solidarity at this time of increasing complexities in our world. The series has also been about compassionate, disruptive actions that might shift the current narrative that we're all experiencing away from isolationism and fear and toward a better, more inclusive, and a much braver world. So since January, we've been meeting each month to touch into how we build solidarity as moral beings in the midst of this seeming historical moment in our country and, in a way, in our world. And we've been endeavoring to address fundamental issues related to individual, collective, and also species survival. You know, in this first session that we offered in January, we explored how our view of individualism shapes the damaging social structures that undermine our democracy. And also, I shared how important it is to live our vows and open ourselves to the direct experience of interbeing. At that time, I didn't know how intense the deconstruction of our democracy would be that we're seeing at this time. My good friend, John Kabat-Zinn, came into the next session in February, and he broke open the issues we're facing in the intersectionality of the current global, what has been called the polycrisis, and how practice is a radical and essential act of sanity in the midst of this current turmoil. And then Cristiana Figueres, the climate diplomat and good friend of Upai's, addressed in the next session the importance of standing firmly and collectively against environmental overreach, against human rights violations, and also in relation to the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and political power that we're experiencing at this time. In the next session, Ruth King explored really important questions related to racism and to privilege. And she suggested that the transformation out of racism through understanding how racial conditioning operates in our lives, and that it's supported by collective practice and our commitment to truth. And then Valerie Brown in April addressed issues related to race, social and environmental justice, and how important it is to actually cultivate a culture of belonging. And today, we're in an exploration of solidarity, and I'm going to try to reflect these themes as they relate to solidarity and how nourishing and protecting democracy means a willingness to engage in a participatory process of shared responsibility and engagement. But I want to begin with a story, and I thought about this a lot. There's so many stories about solidarity. And this is a story that happened before our time, at least before my time. And I think it's important for us to recall right now in our country, as my friend Rebecca Solnit has reminded us, she says, you know, our memory of the past provides us with the ingredients for insight into what might serve the future. So this is the story of the solidarity built during the Indian Salt March in 1930. And what Gandhi saw was that the monopoly and the taxation of salt was an extraordinary injustice that affected all Indians, and most particularly the poorest, who could ill afford this staple. And he chose to challenge the British government's actions through satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance against British authority. And so at the age of 61, he left his ashram on foot with only 78 others to make a 245-mile journey to the village of Dandi on India's coast. And, as they walked from village to village, this small group of 79 grew exponentially as people from all walks of life began to join this march, this protest. Shop owners closed their stores and joined. Students left their classes. Farmers abandoned their fields. Hindus marched alongside Muslims. The highest caste people walked alongside those of the lowest caste. And by the time they reached Dandi on April 5th, many thousands were walking together in solidarity against the British rule. And at the coast, Gandhi picked up a small lump of salt from the mud. It was such a kind of simple act, but it was an act in defiance, as Gandhi proclaimed, "With this, I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." Now, this small gesture inspired literally millions of people throughout India to process their own salt in violation of the law. But within a very few short weeks, more than 60,000 people were thrown into prison, including Gandhi himself. And needless to say, the British authorities responded with violence. It's written that at the Dara salt works, the police brutally beat nonviolent protesters as they approached the salt deposits. But the protesters, and this is so important, they refused to fight, nor would they withdraw. The Salt March didn't immediately bring India to independence, but what it did was to unify Indians across religion, caste, and class. And today, for us, as we begin to explore the power of solidarity, we begin to understand how solidarity and nonviolent resistance can actually change the destiny of a nation. I think it's important also to note that the campaign transformed the independence movement in India from an elite struggle into a massive civil disobedience movement that was characterized by inclusivity. And it laid the groundwork for India's independence in 1947. And for us today, it's an example of how nonviolent resistance and protests carried out by ordinary people, united in a vision of care for others, can challenge the most powerful of oppressors through solidarity. So we can ask, what is solidarity? I think it was in 2011, Grace Lee Boggs wrote in her book, The Next American Revolution. She said, "Movements are born of critical connections rather than critical mass." I think she's right, but there's something else. I think honestly right now, and I also think in the past, it's both. Critical connections plus critical mass. And later, I want to touch into Erica Chenowicz's research briefly. But let's look at what we could mean by this word solidarity, where in our current situation, connection and critical mass could well make a difference. And parenthetically, I think some of you know, as a socially engaged Buddhist and even doing this talk already, I've received my share of pushback saying this is not Buddhism. But I also have talked many times about the Buddha as a social change agent. And also I think about Ashoka as well. Pushback is interesting, but it doesn't necessarily stop the tide of what we're doing. Because from a Buddhist point of view, solidarity is expressed through mutual support and also through shared responsibility. Here we emphasize the experience of interconnectedness, also actually of cause and effect. And also how important it is to actively address suffering and work toward not just our personal well-being, but literally collective well-being. And I think this expresses, in a way, what a bodhisattva-based, socially and environmentally engaged, participatory community is. And that's what I'm endeavoring to explore today. Now, as a first mental gesture, I think we should consider what Bill McKibben recently wrote. He asked this kind of rhetorical question. He said, what can I, as one individual, do? And Bill said, stop thinking as an individual. What can I, as one individual, do? We've all asked that question. And Bill got right to the root of things. Stop thinking as an individual. And feminist theologian Ivona Guevara wrote, she says, nothing is saved alone. Everything is saved in community. So a few years ago, I worked with Dr. Joe Henrich, who's an evolutionary anthropologist at Harvard. And Joe made some very important observations from his research. He said that, as a cultural species, we are dependent on learning from others. And I would suggest, as I think about what Joe's work reflects, that this same rubric applies to engaging in transformative, participatory, political actions. I mean, we bring things alive in and through relationality, through community, and through collective actions that are focused on benefiting the greater whole. And Joe had another very interesting piece for us. He talked about the so-called collective mind. And he said, the collective mind that's found in interconnected groups, that collective mind generates richer ideas than in groups who are isolated and boundaried. And we also know, and this is part from Joe's research, but part, I think, Murat Levkov, who's in Israel right now, working against that tide of violence. Communities have to be diverse for this generativity to happen. So like the Salt March, the solidarity movement of the Eastern Bloc, like the civil rights movement of my era, and the Vietnam anti-war movement in our country, it's important to know that protest movements which have made and changed history, and I keep thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh walking down Fifth Avenue joining this 100,000 of individuals protesting the war in Vietnam, to understand where nonviolent collective actions based on mutual support, based on diversity, inclusivity, shared responsibility, emphasizing interconnectedness and cause and effect, as I said, and actively addressing immediate and long-term suffering, and always pointing toward collective well-being. This is where solidarity really succeeds. You know, when Joe was sharing his work in evolutionary anthropology, you know, I was just fascinated because I saw that his work had such interesting parallels in the ethos of the Bodhisattva perspective, which emphasizes values related to respect, again, this sense of shared responsibility toward the well-being of all, of compassion, inclusion, equity, justice, benevolence, importantly, resilience, wisdom, and collective action or solidarity. So here's a little side trip with a koan that reflects this view. A monk asked the 10th century Rinzai teacher, Shushan Shinyan, what is a bodhisattva before she becomes a Buddha? And Shushan replied, all beings. And the monk said, well, how about after she becomes a Buddha? And Shushan said, all beings. All beings. You know what Shushan is saying and what Dai said in relation to interbeing, Bernie, one body, we're not separate from any being or thing. You know, every being and thing is part of our identity. And this is, in a way, the realization of this is the essence of what makes solidarity. I'm also thinking about what Valerie Brown shared with us during her talk last month in our series. She quoted John Powell on the importance of fostering a culture of belonging, not just an in-group, not just your little sangha, your family, your close friends, but a culture of belonging, a culture of belonging that's radically inclusive. And then I was thinking also about the African term that many of us are becoming more familiar with as we explore solidarity, and that is the term Ubuntu. I am because you are. And in this process of Ubuntu, we realize that we rise through lifting up each other. This is what our solidarity points to. And also my old friend, the late philosopher and neuroscientist Francisco Varela, said the only world we human beings know is the one we can create through the actions of our coexistence. Through the actions of our coexistence. Truly, we have no life without each other. We can think, for example, of Avalokiteshvara with her many hands and eyes. This image of the bodhisattva attitude in terms of what we're exploring today reflects, I feel, this actualization of interdependence and interbeing as a lived collective and participatory experience. Years ago, Roshi, Bernie, and I were at a gathering in the Netherlands when someone asked if they really, what they did really mattered, in their individual efforts to make the world a better place. And we go back to Bill McKibben, do what I do as an individual really matter? And Bernie said to everybody in the room, would you raise your hand if you've helped at least one person in your life? And virtually everybody in that room raised their hand. And Bernie pointed out that this showed how much collective impact was already present in just this one room. So many hands, so many eyes. One of the most powerful visions of solidarity exists in the Avatamsaka Sutra in the image of the jeweled net of Indra, so familiar to a lot of us, where at each node of the net is a precious and unique jewel that reflects all the other unique jewels in this vast net. And the net is actually set against the boundless empty sky. And this is, for me, a really powerful image that exemplifies the interconnectedness of all beings and things and the preciousness of each being and thing, and the absence of a separate self in the space of fundamental openness. It's a kind of vision that reflects natural solidarity. Now, recently I was in San Francisco at a board meeting, and my colleague, Lance Henderson, reminded me that the AIDS memorial quilt was then and still is such a powerful expression of a network of collective loss, of grief, of love, of compassion and interbeing. Each panel, each individual quilt, a life, a loss, and each reflecting the shared life and loss and love of the whole. And the quilt was an embodied and visual metaphor of the power of collective action against the stigma and the inaction of our society in relation to AIDS. And it actually, for me and for so many of us, it continues to be a powerful example of solidarity and collective action for the greater good. So I want to invite us to just take a breath before I pivot a bit. And to ask you to reflect on what your experience is of solidarity, whether it's the AIDS quilt or the protest moment, or sitting in Zazen outside a New Mexico prison as a man is put to death. Thank you. So I want to take just a little bit of time right now to touch into issues related to the rise of authoritarianism that we're experiencing today. Someone recently sent me a very powerful article by the human rights lawyer, Monica Roa, and we'll put this on the resource page. Please read the whole article. It's called Fascism and Isolation versus Democracy and Interconnection, the narrative antidote to authoritarianism. So it's a lot of vowels and consonants, but it is so worth a careful read. And what Monica is pointing to is that we're caught in a kind of narrative dispute. On one side of the equation is the tightening grip of AI, of global corporations of extraction, of the climate crisis, and more, but also of how COVID-19 affected our psychosocial and global reality. And Monica points out that the dominant narrative of individualism, the narrative of and the values associated with competition, and also ideas of personal autonomy actually squeeze the life out of actions that are essential for strengthening democracy and building a culture for the greater good of all. Increasing personal isolation, she points out, undoes the very benefits of our shared, embodied experience of meeting each other in the commons of our everyday life, where we connect, where we discover, where we learn from others, and where we negotiate contact and cooperation. And indeed, here we are, so many of us find ourselves alone or isolated in the two-dimensional, disembodied cubicles of the digital world. Roa shares that the narrative, quote, of individualism, both told and lived, has paved the way for the rise of authoritarianism by fragmenting our societies and eroding the communal ties that sustain us. This is a really powerful perspective that she's sharing with us. My good friend, Rebecca Solnit, I hope she's online, or I'll send her the link to this. She's written a powerful new book, No Straight Road, and she quotes Jessica Chang's comments about mutual aid during the pandemic. And Jessica's written, in the modern colonial world, we are disciplined to be lonely. We are disciplined to be lonely. The oppressors call this loneliness individuality. A lot of important research in cognitive science has been going on around relationality. For example, our good friend Molly Crockett and Joanna Macy, Monica Roa, Rebecca Solnit, Lee Boggs, they all have been making the point that relationality is the very basis of well-being, and that mutuality, empathy, caring, compassion, the commons, and community are absolutely essential for individual, collective, and species survival, and also for an open democracy. And I'm remembering Terry Tempest Williams when she was at Upaya last November. Happily, she and Rebecca and Valerie Brown will be back in November. And Terry kept making the point that we have to understand that narratives of isolation, autonomy, disconnection actually instill fear and justify power and control. And Terry makes the point that now is a time to return to narratives that restore the vision that our connection with others and the natural world has got to be enlivened. And that these narratives and actions of connection are core to a democracy that is truly open and, in fact, to our own personal survival. You know, in a way, we're in a kind of loneliness hangover from the pandemic. Many of our embodied and connective experiences have been replaced by what Monica Roa calls individualized consumption of entertainment and services. And I'm going to name a bunch that I've been thinking about, like AI diagnosing our illnesses and giving us so-called care, or gazing at our iPhones instead of each other, or sitting on the couch alone watching a film on Netflix and not sharing laughter in our local theater, or ordering out for dinner and not seeing what meal is being brought to the person at the next table, or ordering from Amazon and missing the interpersonal negotiations of actual live shopping, or going to a virtual museum to see a Rembrandt and not being caught in the reverie of the viewer next to us. Or, as you know, every day, twice a day, we offer meditation online, but doing just virtual meditation practice and not smelling the years of incense that has penetrated the wood and cushions of our Zendo. Having a virtual office and no water cooler moment, or being silently transported by a driverless car in San Francisco to a half-empty glass tower instead of joking with a gig worker, or smashing the like button on X instead of being enveloped in the summer of love feeling like Wendy and I were the other day around at the Roundhouse at our state's capital, or at least the shared sense of the possible that we experience at a protest rally. You know, when we sit in Upaya's temple and do zazen with others, or those of you who are gathered in the Taizando today, or when we sit around the great table at Upaya for the dinner meal, or when we together join a protest at Santa Fe's Capitol, like we did in the winter of the Women's March, leaving Sesshin and walking in the snow downtown. When we plant the Three Sisters Garden here at Upaya in June with our Pueblo brothers and sisters, our hands in the dirt, I think this is where democracy can really grow. And yet, here we are, poking at this through a two-dimensional digital reality, without which we'd be unable to meet like this. And yet, I think that we have to understand that democracy is woven through our collective spaces, our collective embodied actions. This is where Sangha is made, where we encounter each other, stranger and friend directly, and find our way through and with each other. Monica Roa writes that, quotes, technological platforms have imposed an individualism that now, for so many of us, governs our daily lives and maximizes economic gains. And many of you have heard me say again and again that our attention has been colonized by the corporate world. And in it, we take ourselves out of the spaces for collective living. And knowing that without these public spaces, the commons of our churches and temples, our parks, our theaters, our museums, our protests, basically embodied experiences of mutuality and connection, it becomes more and more difficult for us to visualize a commonly held and commonly lived future. But there is another way. This kind of freedom and our democracy, it's not achieved in isolation, but through embodied connections that inform, enliven, and sustain us. And as our good friend Molly Crockett has pointed out, a country is not more secure, and we're experiencing that right now, when it shuts itself off from the world, but when it meets with others, collaborates with others in the process of addressing global issues. And we can ask ourselves if we, as individuals, are in fact more secure in our experience of relative isolation. I think not. Again, Joanna Macy. It is the delusion that the self is so separate and fragile that we must delineate and defend its boundaries, that it is so small and so needy that we must endlessly acquire and endlessly consume, and that as individuals, corporations, nation states, or species, we can be immune to what we do to other beings. But as I've suggested earlier, together we rise. For social and environmental movements like the Nonviolent Salt March or the Civil Rights Movement and Vietnam anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s, I mean, the protests that relate to our climate catastrophe, the protests about the horrors of the Gaza genocide. These experiences of collective, nonviolent defiance are embodied moments that have gathered so many around a common purpose that's dedicated to transforming political, social, and environmental realities for the greater good. And they have been, and they are collective actions about increasing security for all, not just for ourselves. I spoke about Erica Chenoweth earlier. She's a political scientist and professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. And she and others have studied nonviolent civil resistance movements, and she's made a really important discovery about the effectiveness of nonviolent movements. Every campaign with active participation from at least 3.5% of the population succeeded, and many succeeded with 3.5% number gives us an interesting benchmark. We have to understand all the campaigns that achieved the 3.5 threshold were nonviolent. No violent campaign achieved that threshold. And what this suggests is important for us today. That no government can stand up against the challenge of 3.5% of its population without either accommodating the movement or completely disintegrating. You know, in a sidebar in the US, that would mean some 11.5 million people to meet that 3.5 number. So we are urged not to surrender possibility to despair or to hopelessness. I mean, we need imagination, and we need each other to move forward. Ernie, my teacher, he had imagination. He was dedicated to what, in his root tradition of Judaism, tikkun olam. He was dedicated to this project of repairing the brokenness in the world. And he did not let brokenness stop him. In fact, as you all know, he invited many of us to go to exactly where there was brokenness, because he imagined a world where brokenness was repaired. And I think that's why we're here today. And that's why imagination and the bodhisattva ideal of many hands and eyes, of lived interbeing, is so important right now. It's not the fantasy of the worst is yet to come. Not that nightmare. It's the imagination that is born from being open to the best of all possibilities, and to do our collective best to actualize that possibility with and through each other in solidarity. When we look deeply, we can see that the history of social movements and of enduring social change is not the work of a single individual, but of communities living the narrative of connection, of interbeing, of ethical, courageous, and caring solidarity. Interconnected communities dedicated to the well-being of all. I mean, one person like Gandhi or Dr. King, Lech Walesa, Thich Nhat Hanh, Greta Thunberg, Mohsen Madawi, they're the spark. But the movement only works because, like fire, we rise up together. So I want to return to Joanna Macy. She writes, if the world is to be healed through human efforts, I'm convinced it will be by ordinary people, people whose love for this life is even greater than their fear. Friends, I feel it's time for us to activate our collective power. And yeah, it's that one that really shows up in how we live, how we create, how we narrate our lives and the lives of others, and to engage in connection with each other in order to build a way ahead where this lived experience of interbeing, inclusivity, and solidarity is key to our collective survival. And as Rebecca has pointed out again and again, it's not just to defend what we had, but it's actually to imagine something better. A society where well-being is not a privilege reserved for a few. But to quote Rebecca, the certainty that each person's well-being, each being's well-being depends on the well-being of all. I feel at this time actualizing solidarity as a practice, as a life way, will bring us there. May it be so. Thank you. So let me do this. This is a time with online community for us to open to questions and thoughts. Going to essence, please. Concerns, disagreement, and doing so by the best for me is for you to raise your digital hand. Wendy will help to bring you online. Again, I just urge us to go to essence and so we can meet you and meet as many of you as possible. And also know I will probably call on some of you if you don't mind. Merle, who's in Israel right now, if you're there and can raise your digital hand, that would be wonderful. And let's begin, Dee Dee.
You're unmuted.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
You are fine.
Okay, thank you. It's always wonderful to sort of coalesce and refine and have a simple word for something. So when I listen, I think Maitreya and how I always want to base everything on nature myself. I don't have a word for that, but I am, and I'm in it, and it is in me. But it's rather to me like the flowers you were talking about, Martin Luther King and Joanna Macy. To me, they're flowering of nature.
Yeah.
And the idea that as a collective body we are the Maitreya. I'm not sure how to say it. The Maitreya. It takes a sort of it's very comforting. It kind of takes a mystery out of what's happening to me. It's a natural development in my mind of nature, like a root or like a flower. So that's my thinking.
Dee Dee, thank you. That is wonderful that you invoked Maitreya, because Maitreya really carries the spirit of loving kindness and nonviolence. Thank you so much. And Donna, going to essence.
Yes, I just want to say I'm ready to march. I've been doing it. I'm around your age, Roshi, and I did all that years ago in California during the good old days.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
we're in the weird old
I'm
days.
free. I'm retired and ready to march wherever I want another 11 million person march on Washington.
All right. I'll see you there, Donna. Thank you. Hey, Barb.
Waiting, there we go.
There you go.
Thank you so much. I really needed to hear Grace Boggs this morning. That's very, very helpful. And I needed to look up the etymology of solidarity being a communion of interests and responsibilities. And I want to encourage everyone who's older or younger to remember each other in the movements that you are in. I do conflict work, and I'm working with a lot of activist groups who are feeling a certain competitiveness to be leading. And so I just want to encourage all of us who are in those groups to encourage solidarity and connections over mass. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Bonnie. And I'm going to jump over to Merle. Wow, I'm so happy to see you tuning in from where?
Jerusalem.
Thank you, Merle.
Yeah, can you hear me, Roshi?
Yeah, we hear you.
You hear me? I came on tonight. It's tonight in Jerusalem, because I told Roshi I needed some extra energy here as I'm working in Jerusalem. Barb, solidarity is a self-organizing process with lots of leaders, right? Waiting to emerge. And it's one of the things I think about a lot while I'm here now, because there is leadership absent on all sides of what's happening here. It's very hard for me to talk about what's happening now. I have to think very, very deeply about this. And also, I have to say, as I feel a double whammy as both a Jew and an American, because we are supporting this genocide. And I am also bereft at what's happening, that is something that is impossible for me to imagine, but it's happening, that my people are able to do this. We know many, many historic reasons for this, but there's no excuse. We have to assume the responsibility, both as Americans and as Jews, those of you who are Jewish. So I'm thinking deeply about this, and I needed to come in tonight. And I appreciate, Roshi, I appreciate so much everything you said. It's very helpful to me while I'm here working. And I just want to leave all of you with the thought, and I'm serious about this. If everybody, all 600 of you that came on tonight, if your collective wisdom, and the fact that you're all connected, and we're all connected right now online, but otherwise we couldn't be together tonight. Please pray for peace. Yeah. Please remember that, seriously, please remember that there is always hope in the future. We don't know what the future is going to bring. The future is unknown, but the adjacent possibles are already waiting for us to discover. and we have to do it together. So Roshi, thank you so much. It's really helpful.
Merle, you know, I think if Bernie was alive, he'd be right there with you. He, you know, the charnel grounds are where he practiced. And it is an inspiration to us that you are there today doing the work that you are doing as a Jew and as an American. And really living that Hebrew term, tikkun olam, doing whatever you can and your way as a scientist of complex adaptive systems and as a peacemaker, really endeavoring to repair the world, not turning away from that suffering. Thank you so much for your practice. So I want to invite Paula Arai, another Dharma friend, to join. And I'm sure Paula did not miss, as I was going through this exploration of solidarity, how many women's voices I called out.
Thank you, Roshi. I'm so inspired and feeling so porous right now. And what you said about individualism and that narrative that has become so strong in the modern West. And every time I read the Bodhisattva vows in English that say, I vow, the Chinese and the Japanese, there is no I in the vow. It's just vowing. It's an activity. And so to rewrite the narrative that we are interdependent, I would encourage people to explore with translations, English translations of the Bodhisattva vows, to remove the I, because that, you know, is a bit antithetical to what you're vowing.
Oh, Paula, I just did it in my head. Creations are numberless. Vow to free them all.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will amend our version. Thank you so much for that. Let's just take a breath with Paula's recommendation and also reflecting on what Merle and others have said. And one thing I want to call out, and that is what Merle shared about her brokenheartedness. It is not for us to turn away from our anger and anguish, our sorrow, our incredulity, our many responses to what we're facing, including our fear. But it's to turn toward exactly those experiences, those charnel ground manifestations, and ask, well, what are we learning here? What is important to vow at this time? I don't think Merle flew all the way into the charnel ground of the Mideast for any other reason than her brokenheartedness. It's like the tear of Avalokiteshvara. It becomes the moisture that makes it possible for us to open ourselves to whatever is arising in facing the suffering of the one and the many. We'll turn now back to our friends who have raised hands, and just taking a breath. I see Bonnie. Somebody else do the unmute and lower hands. Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay. Thank you for the beautiful words from everyone. Something that's happening, I'll try to free the I, but something that's happening for me is difficult family issues. And I've really come to realize that the wounds in the family, how they affect the collective. And we all know this, but it's really big in my life right now. Like, I can go to marches and I can write my congressman and I can do all this stuff, but my attention is right now on my child that with very painful issues coming up. And so it's not just about out there, that's got problems, that it starts with the individual and the family. And like I said, we all know this, but that I'm surprised, because I thought I was going to be out there marching and I am doing some of that, but a big part of my attention's being drawn to finding ways to heal the family unit. So
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to understand that our family, our neighbors, our city, our nation are not separate from the wider world. And we offer service at the scale that we feel we can be aligned with our capacities. I just thank you for bringing the family into focus. And Donna.
And Donna bowing in. I can't thank you enough, Roshi, for what you presented today. My heart has been breaking tremendously with all the suffering in the world, especially the genocide in Palestine. And I've been a practitioner in the Plum Village tradition for over 20 years. I've been with Thich Nhat Hanh. And my heart is breaking because the Plum Village tradition is not speaking, as you speak, all the things I needed to hear that I think are ties to teachings. I need to protest, how you brought together the camaraderie. So now I'm even afraid to say this, because when I speak in my Plum Village tradition worldwide Sangha, I'm not allowed to say the word genocide. I'm not allowed to say anything. And so I can't thank you enough, and just wanted to express how my heart is breaking for keeping Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings alive. I appreciate it.
There are many Dharma doors and many ways that we protect ourselves and our communities. Honestly, Bonnie, I have had quite a bit of criticism heaped on me because of how we speak out, and so be it. It's so interesting how also communities change through time. I think Baker Roshi, who might be in the Taizando, was in the Peace March with Thich Nhat Hanh in many years ago. And I think this is one of the things that we understand. We see things as we age through different lenses. And we carry our teachers' teachings forward in the way that is congruent with our own experience. My hunch is that the word genocide will be normalized in communities, Buddhist communities everywhere, sooner or later. My hunch also is that not all Buddhists feel comfortable with the degree of social engagement, of defiance that is typical of me. And so be it. I think the Buddha, in his way, was somewhat defiant, too, in terms of flattening out the caste system and of endeavoring to create a sangha of inclusivity. I come off the rails all the time. And hopefully, as I'm struggling back on, I and we in our community are learning from our own challenges, and also the mirror being held up to us of when we have been misaligned with the greater good. And by the way, I gave a talk for the Plum Village community last week or a few days ago. I have to laugh. I don't know if I mentioned genocide, but I think I was pretty straightforward in that talk. If they invite me back again, I might, what can I say, poke the bear, so to speak, as is my nature. But thank you for your courage in bringing that up. And yeah, we all have different ways of approaching the Dharma. I learned so much from Thai. And I'm grateful for you, in a way, speaking to what Thai stood for when he was a young man. Thank you. So I see my old friend Stephanie Kaza has her hand up. Stephanie. And this is Joanna Macy's close friend. Can we...
All right, there I am. Hi, Roshi.
Hey,
So good
Stephanie.
to see you. I wanted to bring up something to complement what you've been talking about in terms of solidarity. And as you know, I just returned from the Upaya Zen Center trip to Japan. And everywhere I walked, I saw how people managed to be civil in their society and culture as a general rule. And I really wanted to observe, how do they do this? Now, I'm a complete beginner. I cannot make any big pronouncements, but there are at least two things which we do all the time in the United States, which they do not do, which they see as quite rude. And that is talking on your cell phone while you're in public space, walking or in a cafe. They just do not do it. And eating while you are in a public space walking. If you've bought an ice cream cone, you're expected to sit down and at a picnic table and consume it. So these are two very small actions really any of us could choose to do. I've become quite self-conscious myself about talking while I'm out on a walk. So I understand that at the base of those sort of politeness protocols is a desire to protect the civil public space.
Yeah.
And that is one way to really combat individualism, because every time we're out just thinking we're the only one in our little bubble eating or walking, we're reproducing that. So there are many things I brought back from Japan, but with this conversation, I thought it's a little bit like what Paula said. Instead of reproducing the I in our vows and in our everyday public actions, well, cut back a little. Anyway, that's a little offering. So much more I could tell you about Japan, but I would thought for this conversation around solidarity, working against individuality is a really big practice challenge for us to take up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's great to connect. After that time, I heard it was an amazing pilgrimage. You know, Monica Roa's point and Terry Tempest Williams' work in the environment, our orientation here at UPI is how can we bring people back to the commons? As Roa pointed out, democracy is woven in the commons, in these common spaces where we connect and where we negotiate mutuality. And we just see, I mean, I'm so grateful for technology. Over 600 people today gathered online. I'm so grateful for that. But those who only were online for years with us, now coming into our Zendo, are having a very unique experience of what it is to be in the commons of a practice field. And yes, there's the convenience of this solipsistic and structured context away from encountering each other. But as Roa points out, it is a way for us to actually be controlled by corporate interests and also to have our sense of security with and through each other eroded by increasing isolation and distrust arising from that. So, you know, when Wendy and I went down to the Roundhouse day before, 3 days ago, it was just exactly what needed to happen for my own spirit to be renewed, to stand with others, to sing with others, to chant with others, expressing concern about the conditions for workers in our country, which is May 1st, but also expressing the solidarity of being with each other in an act that was about benefiting the collective good. And that sensibility, in a certain way, is an invitation for us to return to embodied, lived connection. Yeah, I really appreciate what Monica Roa has written. We'll put her piece into the resource page. Chosui, I think you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Roshi, I do. And thank you for solidarity. I see this as an opportunity. I had brought this up to you once before, a few weeks ago online, about cells, about creating cells. We have 600 people worldwide. I am thinking about how we create solidarity amongst those of us who have shown up here online today. And my work, I'm sorry, my little dog is making little noises to go out. But anyway, I have been working on the cellular level, but in a large way, talking about cells for peace, cells of resistance, cells for feminism, cells to stop sex trafficking, cells to stop the fascist onslaught that we are facing in reality in America. I know that there are people, because I have seen them before online, who are social activists, and some people who have even, I've heard say, I don't know what to do. Is there any way that we can communicate, that people can reach me who are interested, no matter where in the world you are, in creating a cell with your community or outside of your community to address so much that really needs to be seen, and that we need to work to temper, to bring our compassion, and to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I'm crying.
I'm grateful you're crying. The cells that you're referring to are all interconnected in the one body of interbeing, of solidarity, of life.
Yes.
And that, how we can do this, not just digitally, although, here we are, hundreds of us together, but, how we embody this in our lived experience with and through each other. I keep coming back, this Zen practice that I have been engaged in for many decades is an embodied practice, but it's also a relational practice. It's coming to experience the world not as an individual, but in an uncommon way, in the common landscape of values and practice.
It was very interesting this last practice period, during the spring practice period. Our online community became extraordinarily close. Everybody was showing up all the time. And what I'm proposing is not that this be a separate thing, but that those of us who are interested in beginning things where they are might take on a model that I would like to propose that would be interconnected, both in terms of the fact that there are 400 of us online to hear you today about solidarity, and then to take that out and to reach out wherever you are and expand it.
So we have the beginning of that in what we call the seed sanghas. And that is, an individual who wants to step forward to steward local communities, local individuals in not only practice, but also social and environmental action. So maybe we have the, if you will, the substrate of the beginning of that structure already at Upaya, and let's confer with Choro. That I think is, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next dinner, by the way.
Thank you, and thank you everybody online.
And I see also, I want to invite Marilyn Preston, if you could share a little bit. We have a few minutes left in this session.
Is that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excuse my outfit here. I so appreciate everything you said, but particularly how you linked personal well-being, taking the time, sit in the sun, walk in nature, do the breathing, do the practice, and our need to participate in universal well-being. And the two can mutually coexist and create joy. And that's good too. So thank you for reminding us. It's not either or, and we don't want to sacrifice our well-being to enhance the world.
I so agree. That's why we went up to the refuge for 24 hours. I did a little jig on my deck. I've had a lot to deal with the past few weeks, and also just being in touch with what's happening in our country, in Israel, in Gaza, in Ukraine, Myanmar, and more. It can really take its toll on you. But I think, Merle, you saying that talking about the sorrow that you feel. It is what also brings moisture and commitment. By the same token, we need good self-stewardship in these times. So thank you, dear friend. It's very wonderful to connect. So I see Jake Goldfarb. Haven't seen you in a while, and forgive me for not getting back to you sooner. Jay.
Yes. So thank you,
You're in
Roshi.
Switzerland now, or where?
I'm in Switzerland now. Yes.
Okay.
So all of you that have been saying about Jewish things, Gaza world, it just reminds me all the time of the need to go to the source, the namaste that we all have, to really look at each person deeply and look at the sameness that we have. We're on one planet, it's one boat. And the more I can do that, the better it is. And we have a community here, as you know, that really tries to remember that when we can. And Ram Dass always said some of the angriest people were the ones he met at peace conferences and things. And the protests have to really come from the heart to protect the other person that you think is the other, when it's really just us in another guise. And I'd just like to thank you for bringing the solidarity of social action together with this representation deep in the heart, that we're really in this together, even the people like Pope Donald.
Oh, that was terrible. Talk about, oh, God.
Yeah.
So, I want to just address anger for a minute. Some of you have heard me say this before. Anger is usually arising out of a loss of being able to control one's circumstances. And what is really important to consider, and I think you pointed toward it, our acts of defiance not coming from anger, but from love, from connection, from a sense of moral character, the moral character of who we really are. And to understand how terrorists are made by taking away the sense of any control agency in one's own life, and of pouring violence into those worlds. Mm-hmm. So we're at the hour. I just want to do the rewritten 4 vows, but I also want to thank all of you for showing up, and for our Upaya wonderful staff, Kodo and Bonnie, Manny, the whole gaggle. How this happens is through you and Wendy and the residents and all of you. Thank you so much. And also knowing your support really makes a difference. So I'm going to just do the refurbed 4 vows. Creations are numberless. Vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. Vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. Vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. Vow to embody it. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave the Zoom right now and walk down to Tai San Do and just reflect with our on-site community. Thank you again.